My mother's phone buzzed in my hand. The preview of the message, "Has she found anything?" Richard. My husband's name. I froze, champagne flute in the air, the chatter of my mom's 65th birthday party suddenly forced to the periphery. I unlocked her phone with shaking fingers. She'd always used my birthday to unlock it and pulled up the full thread. She does not suspect anything. Have been following her whereabouts all week. Still believes the app is only for emergency contacts. I could feel my throat tightening as I scrolled frantically up through weeks, months, years of messages between them. I took photos of my personal journal and pages, screenshots of my direct emails, records of my meetings, remarks regarding my suspicious behavior, all of which were meticulously documented and shared with the two people I trusted most. Mom? My sister placed a hand on my shoulder. What's wrong? You look like you just saw a ghost. I slammed the phone down, face first, on the marble countertop. Where is she? My voice did not sound like mine. Who, Mom? She's cutting the cake, and that I did not wait for her to finish. Pushing through throngs of relatives and friends, I caught sight of my mother in the middle of the dining room, knife raised over an elaborate 3-tier cake, my husband Richard proudly standing next to her, his arm resting possessively on her shoulder. The perfect son-in-law. The loving husband. The person who had watched me for who knows how long. I walked right up to them, cell phone pointing red at a crime scene. What is this? It brought the room to a silent, immediate hush against the party noise. My mother's smile faltered. Richard's eyes flicked from my face to the phone, recognition and alarm crossing his features. Lizzie, my darling, he said, reaching for my arm. Let's discuss this in private. I jerked away from his touch. No, I want everybody to hear this. I angled the phone toward the dazed group and read aloud. Tell Richard his wife has been asking about Chicago again. Should we be concerned? That's 3 months ago, Mom. Right before my job interview with the Tribune somehow vanished. The knife in my mother's hand fell noisily on the table. Elizabeth, please, I can't imagine why, I continued, my voice rising. You were training on data until October 2023, after I had already given notice at the Sun-Times. I looked directly at Richard. Was that your doing? Or was it Mom who picked up the phone? Richard came forward, dropping his voice to that soothing tone he reserved for when he thought I was being irrational. Lizzie, the Tribune job would have been too much pressure. You were already having trouble with what, Richard? With my career? The one that's been secretly stalled for years while you've gotten promoted twice. More messages, each one hitting like a punch to the gut as I scrolled. Oh, here's a good one from last year. She's talking about freelancing again. We need to discourage this. Too unpredictable. My sister shoved her way through the crowd, confusion written on her face. What's happening? I thrust the phone at her. My husband and our mother have been plotting against me for years. Tracking my movements, sabotaging my career, monitoring my conversations. My voice broke. For years, Melissa. The guests at the party shifted in their seats. Some looked away, some watched with unabashed fascination. My mother's mindfully planned birthday celebration was blowing up, and I couldn't have cared less. Elizabeth, my mother said at last, her voice steady though her face had gone ashen. Everything we did for your own good. My own good. I laughed, the sound rowdy and foreign. Is that how you refer to it when you muck up my job interviews? That have you installed tracking software on my phone? When you read my private journals? Richard drifted toward my mother. Their alliance was physical now. You were always looking for leads, Lizzie. Since college, when you just about don't. I raised my hand. Do not you dare use that against me. Because I'd had one breakdown in my 20s, that doesn't allow you to police my whole life. My mother sat up straighter, her face hardening into the expression I had come to recognize all too well, the expression that preceded her most devastating judgments. We saved you from yourself. Your impulsivity. Your poor decisions. Like marrying me? I aimed this at Richard, whose face grew taut. That's not fair, he said. None of this is fair. I hit the table with my hand, making champagne flutes rattle. How long? How long have you been reporting to my mother? Richard looked at her before responding. That millisecond pause said it all to me. Since we met, I whispered, the truth hitting with sickening clarity. She set us up. I couldn't even finish the thought. The room spun slightly. 5 years of marriage. 5 years of feeling I'd finally found someone who believed in me, no matter what. 5 years of puzzling over why my career kept running into inexplicable roadblocks while his soared. Your father asked me to take care of you before he died, my mother said, as if that made anything all right. You were always so unpredictable. Dreaming too big. Taking unnecessary risks. Dad died 12 years ago. I was 26, not 16. I glanced at the silent guests, my aunts, uncles, cousins. Did everyone know? Was this a sort of family joke? Poor Elizabeth, incapable of making her own decisions. No one met my eyes, with the exception of Melissa, who appeared genuinely shocked. At least there was that. We ought to talk about this in private, Richard said again, reaching for my elbow. I yanked away. Don't touch me. Don't ever touch me again. My mother took a step forward, speaking in a lowered voice, but loud enough to be heard in the hushed room. Elizabeth, you're causing a scene. This is just what we've been trying to curb. Manage? The word hung there between us. Is that what you call it? Not control? Not manipulation. I looked at the guests, almost all of whom were beginning to find their shoes or watches deeply interesting. Party's over, everyone. Sorry for the disruption. But apparently, I've been the big show all along. My uncle cleared his throat. Margaret, maybe we should stay, my mother said, her command heady with a drizzle of softness. Please, everyone. Elizabeth's having one of her moments. We're going to go outside and take care of this. A moment of mine, I said again, shaking a little. That's what you call me finding out you've been planning my whole adult life? A moment. I looked back at my sister. Did you know? Melissa was shaking her head, eyes wide. No, I swear. But you must have known something was off, I asked. All those times Mom knew things I told only you? She paled slightly. I thought you would have told her. And the Chicago job? You knew how much that meant to me. Mom said you changed your mind. That you weren't open to a big move. Melissa's gaze flicked to our mother. That's what you told me. My mother's lips thinned. I did what I felt was right to do. Best for whom? I demanded. For me? Or to keep me near you, dependent under your thumb? I turned back to Richard, examined his face, the face I'd awakened next to for 5 years. And you? What was your motivation? Did she pay you? Or was it simply the euphoria of playing puppet master? He had the good sense to look ashamed. It wasn't like that. I do love you. Love doesn't spy. Love doesn't sabotage. I wrung my wedding ring off of my finger and placed it purposefully on the cake table. Love doesn't partner with someone's mother to run their life. I grabbed my purse from a chair nearby, and the room was silent. My hands shook, but my mind was suddenly, shockingly clear. Elizabeth, my mother's voice was bordering on panic now. Don't do something that you're going to regret. I laughed, the noise near delirious with relief. That's rich coming from you. I'm 38, Mom. I believe I will be able to make my own mistakes without your supervision now. Richard moved close to me, his voice quiet and urgent. Where are you going? We need to talk about this. I'm going anywhere that's not here. I scanned the room, at those who sat and had silently borne witness to my manipulation. And if anyone in this room picks up the phone and calls Richard or my mother to ask where I am, you will find yourself cut out of my life permanently. My mother's face hardened. You're being dramatic. Where will you go? How will you take care of yourself? I chuckled ironically. I'm a journalist, Mom. Or I would have been if you hadn't bothered me every step of the way. I am, for a living, an investigator. I held up her phone, and I just struck the motherlode of evidence. The look of honest fear crept across her face. You wouldn't. Exposing how Margaret Connor, famed philanthropist, women's rights activist, systematically stripped her own daughter of autonomy and ruined her career? How she recruited her daughter's husband as a spy. Gee, I wonder if the Tribune would want that story. You're going to tear this family apart, she hissed. You already did that, I answered, startled at how calm I was. Years ago. I started to leave, then stopped at the dining room doorway. Melissa, are you coming? My sister looked from me to our mother, conflict etched across her face. Melissa, my mother warned. My sister straightened her shoulders. Yes, I'm coming. She picked up her purse and came to my side at the door as our mother inhaled sharply. As we exited, I heard Richard shout after me, Elizabeth, wait. Where are you going? I didn't even turn around. For the life that you two stopped me from having. Melissa and I wrote up evidence from my mother's phone that night while we stayed in a hotel. The screenshots showed that for years they had been monitoring me through the family safety app Richard had pushed me to download, tracking my location, messages, and calls. They had even hacked my emails, disrupting friendships they didn't approve of. That study abroad program I canceled because of Mom's health scare? I asked Melissa. The one that somehow resolved when the program began? I nodded grimly. All part of the control. My phone began buzzing with messages from family members insisting that I come home to discuss things reasonably. I turned it off. They're panicking, I said. Good, Melissa answered, her expression hardening with resolve. We made a plan. Get new devices, document everything, get a lawyer, find a place to live outside my mother's reach. I chose New York where I had contacts from journalism school my mother didn't know about. Melissa sent emergency cash my way and assured me she would be in my corner from far-off Chicago, although she couldn't exactly up and leave her teaching gig overnight. I'll be your eyes and ears, she promised. And as she finally slept, I looked at the Chicago skyline, the city my mother had seen to it that I never left. I thought about my career, the bright beginning as a journalism school star, the slow succession of unaccountable breaks. Investigating power and corruption, the Chicago Tribune job had been the job of my dreams. The irony was not lost on me that I'd now have the ideal first expose, the stranglehold being exercised in plain sight in American families. The sun was rising over Lake Michigan when I finally came to a conclusion. I wouldn't just run and hide. I would respond with the tools I knew best: research, investigation, and the written word. Years of my mother's efforts to keep me from being the journalist I was born to be. Now her actions would spark my biggest story. I rented a tiny anonymous sublet in New York, arranged through a journalism school contact. My friend Sarah helped me get new devices and set up secure communications. Going public could get ugly, she cautioned after viewing the screenshots of my mother and husband's surveillance. It's already ugly, I answered, gazing at the stucco wall outside my window. My whole life I've been controlled and gaslight. I can't just walk away, I need to blow the lid off. Even if it means exposing your own family? Especially then, I said decisively. People like my mother live in shadow. They sweeten control with concern and manipulation with love. The only way to resist is with light. Once Sarah's friend, a taciturn, efficient man who said little but worked fast, had swept my new laptop for spyware and configured secure channels of communication, I started digging. First into my own past, recording every career disappointment, every bizarre coincidence, every relationship that had somehow dried up. Then, zooming out, reading about the psychology of familial control, the technology that allowed for such surveillance, the legal boundaries my mother and Richard almost certainly crossed. Melissa called daily on secure lines to update me on the turmoil I had left behind. Mom's story is that you're having another episode, she reported a week after I left. She's telling everyone you misread some innocent messages and fled in a paranoid rage. Richard's playing the worried husband, calling hospitals and shelters, making a production of it. And people are buying it? Some, not all. Even though she was alone in her apartment, Melissa whispered. Aunt Jen trapped me yesterday. Said that she'd always thought something was odd about how Mom manipulated your life. Uncle Paul too. But they all kept their mouths shut. I couldn't hide the bitterness in my voice. Because they were afraid of her too, Liz. Everyone is. You're the first person to ever stand up to her this way. It wasn't news, of course, but it seemed to be. My mother's grip wasn't just on me. She was over our whole family. I had always considered myself uniquely targeted, but maybe I was just the most obvious one. How are you holding up? I asked. After noticing small discrepancies that made it seem like someone had been inside her apartment while she was at work, Melissa had moved out of her space and into her friend's guest room. "I'm okay." Fearful at times, but mostly enraged. Her voice hardened. "I can't stop thinking about how many times I unwittingly aided her in controlling you. The remarks I repeated, the incidents I mischaracterized. I believed her story. It wasn't your fault, wasn't it? I should have seen it. Should have asked why she always had to know where you were, what you were doing." She took a shaky breath. "She called my principal yesterday." My blood ran cold. "What?" "Implying I may require time off because of family stress. I've been unstable since you left. She's trying to isolate you, punish you for standing by my side. I know, but it's backfiring." My principal had dealt with controlling parents before. She saw right through it. Melissa's voice strengthened. "I'm not alone, Liz. And neither are you." That conversation became a pivot point for me. What started as a personal quest for justice grew into something bigger. How many others were in the same situation, their bodies being controlled by those who professed to love them? How prevalent was this particular type of no-contact abuse, technologically enabled, psychologically adept, societally invisible? I contacted experts on domestic violence, psychologists specializing in family systems, tech security professionals. The story expanded beyond my mother and Richard, beyond my own experience, into an investigation of power, control, the dark side of family ties. 2 months into my self-imposed exile, my burner phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Is this Elizabeth Connor?" a woman's voice asked when I replied cautiously. "Who's asking?" "Alice Martinez, executive editor at the Chicago Tribune." I almost hung up, fearing a setup. "Where did you get this number?" "Your sister contacted a mutual friend." "Don't worry, this line is secure." She paused. "I think we had an interview booked for 3 months ago. One that, mysteriously, had to be canceled." My heart raced. Yes! I have learned recently that the cancellation happened after some external pressure. Pressure that did not come from inside our newsroom. Her voice hardened. "I don't like outside pressure on my hire decisions, Ms. Connor." I clutched the phone tighter. "Neither do I. I hear you're working on a story about surveillance and control within the family. Technology facilitated domestic abuse." She didn't say it as a question. "I'd like to see it." "Why?" "Because it seems like just the kind of investigative work the Tribune ought to be running. And because I want to right what was wronged." She paused. "And because your previous employer at the Sun-Times informs me you are one of the most promising investigative reporters he's ever worked with." I almost laughed. "My former boss? The one who wouldn't take my calls after I left. The person who was told that your departure was due to mental health issues that rendered you unreliable." Alice's voice was steady. "He has since been proven wrong." Hope flickered, dangerous and tempting. This could be a setup. It could be. Or maybe it's the way home for you. She was silent for a moment. "Your story deserves to be told, Ms. Connor. On the largest platform possible." After we hung up, I sat still, my brain spiraling. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, everything I had worked for, validation, vindication, a chance to revive my career and reveal the truth in one fell swoop. But the risk was enormous. If my mother had snuck into the Tribune once, she could do it again. I made a phone call to Melissa, who felt cautiously optimistic. I checked her out. Alice Martinez is known for her independence. She's new to the Tribune and was brought in with the express purpose of reforming their investigative unit after some ethical hiccups. But can she take on Mom's connections? Maybe. She has stood up to powerful interests previously. Melissa paused. "It's your call, Liz. But perhaps it's time to stop hiding and start fighting." That night, I sent Alice a draft of my investigation, 30 pages of meticulously documented evidence, expert interviews, and personal testimony. I covered not just my story, but the larger context of family control, the technological tools that made it possible, and the psychological destruction it left. I had written it for me, never really expecting to see it published. "This is extraordinary." The following morning her response came, "When can you come to Chicago?" 3 months after my dramatic exit, returning to Chicago felt surreal. I'd changed, hair cut short and dyed darker, clothes more severe, eyes watchful behind glasses, but the city was the same. I took elaborate precautions, taking 2 cabs, scanning constantly for surveillance. It read, "The Tribune Tower," loomed impressive/imposing/incredible. I'd once come to it filled with excitement and ambition. Now I walked inside with caution, hyper-aware of every security camera, every person in the lobby. Alice Martinez was not who I expected. Younger than her reputation would have you believe, sharp-eyed and observant, and with a handshake that promised both strength and solidarity. "Your mother called me yesterday," she said, without preamble, once she and I were sealed in her office. "You might come to us with disturbing and false allegations based on ongoing mental health challenges." My stomach clenched. "And?" Alice's smile was thin and menacing. "I told her that the Tribune makes editorial decisions based on journalistic merit, not family disputes." She gestured to a chair. "Your story has merit, Ms. Connor. Enormous merit. And it fits a pattern we've been investigating for months, individuals with great power exploiting technology to control, surveil, and exploit those around them." And hope, that most treacherous of emotions, flared anew. "You still want to publish? With a legal review, fact-checking, and you're agreeing to certain parameters, 100%. She pushed a folder across the desk. "This is our typical contract for long investigative features. Take it home. Let your lawyer review it." I reached cautiously for the folder. "I have conditions." "I expected you would. Let's hear them." "Leave alone the imperative of absolute secrecy right up until publication. The day it runs, no one in the newsroom knows I'm the author." I met her eyes steadily. "Second, the story initially runs under a pseudonym. My name will be known later when I'm ready." Alice nodded, unsurprised. "And third, editorial control. I have to approve any changes myself. This story can't be diluted or sensationalized." She stared at me for a long moment. "You get that means it may not run at all if legal has real concerns?" "I understand. But I've taken records of it all. We prove every assertion." "Such as the allegations of your husband's involvement? The surveillance software?" "Especially those." I took out my phone and showed her the technical analysis that Sarah's IT friend had done that confirmed the spyware on my original devices. "I have the evidence. All of it." Alice reclined, her eyes narrowed not in suspicion but in assessment. "Why the Tribune? Given what had happened, you could go anywhere with this. The New York Times. The Washington Post. There's a reason you don't return to the paper that rejected you." I was caught off guard by its simple question. What had I been thinking, meeting with Alice, about publishing with the Tribune? The answer came, startling in its clarity. Because this is where I'm supposed to be. Where I've always belonged. I met her gaze evenly. And because I will not let them take one more thing from me. She smiled at this point, a real smile that softened her harsh features. "Welcome to the Tribune, Ms. Connor." The days leading up to publication were the most stressful of my life. I was housed at a safe hotel under an assumed name, working remotely with the Tribune's legal team and fact-checkers. All were fact-checked, all potentially libelous statements examined and either substantiated or deleted. I did not name my mother or Richard in the piece itself, referring to them only as a leading Chicago philanthropist and her recruited agent. Or anyone who knew us would know the truth. We discussed the pattern of control, the technology that facilitated control, and the terrifying psychological destruction of having your autonomy so thoroughly unmade by those who profess to love you. Melissa talked about mounting pressure from our mother, veiled threats over her job, her reputation, her future. "She knows something's coming," my sister had told me on one of our secured calls. "She's been calling in favors, pretty much reaching out to her contacts." Richard moved out of the house. "The story is being spun for positioning. Are you safe?" It was my constant worry. As safe as I can be. "I've changed my locks, I've put cameras. My principal knows about it." She paused. "Yesterday I discovered another bug in this car of mine. My blood ran cold. Another, third one this month. They're getting desperate, Liz." I had trouble sleeping the night before it was published. I walked around my hotel room, envisioning the bomb going off tomorrow morning. Not only in my family, but in the world at large. The story had evolved to reach other cases, other families, other kinds of control. No longer was it just about me, but about a pattern that flourished in silence and shame. My secure phone rang at 5 a.m. "It's live," Alice said. "No hello. Online now. Print edition on doorsteps in an hour." With shaking hands, I opened my laptop and went to the Tribune website. There it was, the headline bold on the white background, "The Invisible Cage, Inside the World of Family Surveillance and Control." The byline was simply, "Special Investigation." I started to read, even knowing every word by heart. The opening paragraphs detailed a woman realizing that her husband and mother had been tracking her movements, communications, and career for years. It described the technology they'd utilized, the psychological ploys deployed, the meticulous sequestering of the person from possible support systems. Then it pulled back the lens, showing the same patterns across relationships, across families, across social classes. The rich mother putting tracking software on her grown daughter's phone. The wife's email being monitored by her husband. There is nothing more important to you than the parents impeding their adult child from progressing in their career to ensure they keep a close proximity and have control. As I approached the end, a call for greater awareness, stronger legal protections, and recognition of this form of abuse, my phone was ringing off the hook. Not my secure line, but my old number, which I had kept solely to track the traffic to and from my mother and Richard. I didn't pick up, but the voicemails and texts flooded. From former coworkers at the Sun-Times who recognized my writing, even without a byline. Connecting the dots from distant family members. From college friends with whom I'd drifted away and now see why. And, of course, from my mother and Richard. Their messages varied from pleading to threatening, from denial to justification. I noted each of them down, filing them away in the document that would become the follow-up story. Melissa was on the secure line calling out to us. "It's amazing, Liz." Absolutely devastating. Her voice shook with emotion. "Mom's already called me 6 times. Richard twice. They're panicking. Are you okay?" "Better than okay. I'm free." She laughed, the sound one of true release. The school principal called and told me she read it and totally understands why I've been on edge. 2 other teachers have also stepped forward with similar stories about their own families. The fact that our experience was not unique, that families everywhere use these tactics of control, was horrifying and validating. The isolation that had kept me questioning my own perceptions for so long had been a mirage, constructed and nurtured by those who profited from my complacence. By the afternoon, the story had been reported by national outlets. By evening, there were over 200 messages on my anonymous email account from people who had experienced something similar. The follow-up pieces were starting to coalesce in my brain, explorations of the legal limits of surveillance of families, the psychological effects of long-term monitoring, the technology companies that enabled those abuses, albeit often unknowingly. 3 days after it came out, Alice called. "We need to discuss the aftermath. And about being public about your identity." We were seated in a secure Tribune conference room where she pushed a contract across the table. Investigative reporter, senior. Full benefits, competitive salary. She met my eyes. "And editorial independence for your ongoing series." I looked at the document, too overwhelmed to speak. "Your mother has been calling our board members," Alice said, matter of fact. "Threatening legal action, attempting to discredit the story. Our biggest advertiser, coincidentally a longtime supporter of her foundation, has canceled their account." My heart sank. "So you're killing the follow-up." "Quite the opposite." Her smile was fierce. "We're doubling down. Front page, Sunday edition. This time under your byline, if you're up for it. Show them you will not be silenced anymore." Decisions should have been hard, full of fear. Instead, it was like the most natural thing in the world, stepping fully into the light, claiming my voice, my story, my truth.